In the book Built to Last, there's this really good analogy about how people study companies, about how they learn from the best of the best. And they talk about if you were to study 18 visionary companies and you were to do a study of what makes them tick, you would discover that there is a perfect correlation. There is a 100% correlation between the top 18 biggest companies in the world and the fact that they all have buildings. You get where this is going. If you were to just look at the facts and just draw conclusions from them, you're probably going to draw some wrong conclusions. You'd also discover that all these buildings have desks inside of them. And so if you want to be a perfect company or a big company, you have to have desks. And that's what makes it a big company. You can see the flawed logic here. And there's a lot of flawed logic that I've noticed that it seems like people in our culture, me, everyone seems to follow. And yeah, I think we all realize there's a little bit of flaws in our logic, but sometimes we don't actually look at what's driving it and we don't expose it. And so what I want to do is just go through a couple things I think people don't notice when they're trying to learn something. They try to learn something based off something that happened and they forget to look at these key details. And so the first one, well, this isn't even a first one. This is kind of a softball pitch to get started. And this is a little warm up round. It's that ChatGPT comes up with facts for you. So just remember, however easy it is for it to come up with facts, to say 99% of people do this or most people do this, just remember that's happening all the time. People are just saying, well, a large percentage or everybody I know is doing this. Okay, that was an easy one. Now we're starting with number one. Number one is we don't look at the time period of when something happened. So for example, I think of a guy named Robert Rodriguez. He directed Alita Battle Angel. He directed a bunch of movies back in the 90s. He directed some of the Mandalorian episodes, the Book of Boba Fett. And his success story is the filmmaking success story that everybody dreams of. Basically, he couldn't break in because he lived in Texas. And so he went to Mexico, filmed a $7,000 movie on a complete shoestring budget, just having fun. And then somehow it blew up, won Sundance, and had an epic ride to get him into filmmaking. But his moment of breakthrough was that he went to an agent's office and delivered the script, basically, and delivered the movie and just said, hey, is this any good? And they ended up being the agent that represented him, got him to all the places that he wanted to go. And so filmmakers for years now look back at this story in the 90s and try and think of how they can make this happen. They're learning the right lesson of the know-how and the grit and they just go make something, but they're looking at key elements and they're forgetting that this happened in the 90s. That was about almost 30 years, or more than 30 years ago now. Things change, things are constantly changing. And so when we're taking a look at lessons and we're trying to learn from other people or learn from experiences, we think of something that happened and it may have just happened a year ago, but the world's completely changed since then. Or it may have happened 30 years ago and it's totally changed. So looking at the time is not always perfect. Number two is we look at the culture and we forget to differentiate the culture of the thing that we're learning from or the thing we're looking at. Maybe we look at a business book and it talks about this type of thing to do, or this is how a great way to go about in this successful area, but we're not thinking about the culture. Maybe it's a whole different country, or maybe you're listening to college advice and it's coming from somebody who went to a Christian college and not to a secular college, or any other number of things. And we forget to differentiate the culture of where something's coming from before we take a look at if it's something that should apply to us. I think about the people on YouTube. I have no idea their background. I have no idea what their culture is like or what context they're talking about, or if they're in a business or a nonprofit or an entrepreneur business or a big business like Google. You have no idea where their advice is coming from. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just sometimes we need to take a look at the culture and decide if that is a key element before we just move on and accept it as great advice. Number three is we don't see the grit or the perseverance involved. Stories that make the headlines are the stories of success, of things happening. And typically it's something along the lines of some filmmaker did this, or some author broke out with her book, or this business person just had incredible success. And we aren't looking at all the work that it took to get there. You see, pretty much every single success in history starts with a lot of grit and perseverance. Now, some take a little more perseverance than others, but we just don't look at the perseverance involved. And we see someone successful or we see something great that happened and we just forget that it took a lot of execution. We may see a great idea, and it was a great idea, but we don't see how many years it took to get people on board with that idea in order to make it successful. Number four is we compress time way too easily. If you read through the Bible, you're going to look at just a bunch of people that were lacking in their faith and were just making mistakes and just could not keep their head straight to the task of what they were supposed to do of following God. And it seems so easy and so simple. But you forget that there were months between some of these things. For Moses was on the mountain for 40 days, and 40 days is a long time. I can lose motivation in about 30 hours. And then add a couple more days to that, and that's 40 days, and you can see where some doubt started to creep in. Or we study the Israelites overall, and there's years, decades, generations between some events happening. And that's just one example of the Bible, but there's so many examples in history of where we just compress time. We see, reading a biography, John D. Rockefeller, you can see how he became an oil tycoon by just looking at 9 months of his life and just, wow, it all happened in 9 months. It was great. We forget that day to day, the way we look at time is different than the way that you look at time when you're looking at a book or reading a story or hearing about someone's success. And we forget that individual actions are contained within time, and we're not looking at it all together. And so we compress time, and sometimes we learn the wrong lessons, or we get discouraged because we're compressing time. Number 5 is we assume all situations are the same. If somebody gives some great advice in this relationship or gives great advice about starting a business, we're just assuming that it naturally applies to us. Now, it's pretty similar to a different time or different culture or different personality, whatever, but we just assume that all situations are the same. If one thing happened, well, back in my day when I did this, it means this. Or last year when I did this job and it was a starting entry job, I did this and got promoted, so that means that in this job, you can also do that and get promoted. And we forget that there's timeless principles involved. You can't just assume all situations are the same. Number 6 is we don't give lessons long enough to play out. We want quick over character. We just want something to just play out instantly. We want to follow some advice and boom, it happens. Or we just assume if somebody said work hard, well, I'm going to work hard for a day and then my life is going to be great. Or I'm going to read one book and my life is going to change. Or I'm going to do this really quickly or take this quick hack or whatever it is. We think that by doing one thing, we're going to do the entire results of it. But life is not defined by the 3 to 4 grand moments where your character is tested and it's a big movie epic cinematic moment. They're tested by the thousands of little moments that nobody sees, and that's what creates character. And so sometimes we just want a quick thing, and when we're looking at someone's life and we see the little quick moments, the moments of actual change, we try and see what happened right before then, and we forget that life is not defined by just 3 or 4 big moments. Number 7 is we look at someone's life or we hear about a story of somebody and we hear what they did, but we forget that who they are precedes what they do. And so somebody who is, say, a president's kid, he's probably going to have more success happen because of who he is. He's someone who everyone's watching. And so he may write a book and it's going to get a lot more attention than if I wrote a book. And so sometimes we look at what somebody did and forget that who they are is sometimes more important than what they did. Now, of course, we wish it were all merit-based, but there's just so many parts of life that are not. And so somebody may do the same thing. The YouTuber may make the exact same video, but if they have 10,000 subscribers versus if they have 20 million subscribers, it's just going to perform differently. And somebody who is funny may have a different life skill than somebody who is just very serious, cut and dry, go get them. And so they may do the same action, but it may have slightly different results. And sometimes we learn the wrong lesson by forgetting that we're not just like everybody else. We were created unique. Number 8 is we forget common sense. Sometimes you just get so into the detail, nitty-gritty of trying to study somebody's life or study a business or just hearing your friends talking about this and you're trying to analyze it from every different angle. And sometimes you just forget plain old common sense. And it's okay. I mean, it's going to happen. Sometimes you just have to take a step back and look at it. But so many times we get caught up in the details and how something's supposed to work and calculating this and this study that means this and this book who wrote this and blah, 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 blah. And we just forget plain old common sense. Number 9, we don't see under the flow. I think of all the things that make up a decision or a moment, and sometimes we see the result, but we don't know everything that went into it. For example, you could study the exact way that I went about proposing to my fiance and went about dating my fiance, almost wife. And you could look at it and you could see an exact cause and effect and make a correlation and decide that if you do those same things, you're going to have the same result. If you ask a girl out in the same way, you're going to have the same result. If you go about proposing in the same way, you're going to have the same result. But that is just not how it happened at all. You could look at what happened, but that's not what was underlying. That's not what made it happen. What made it happen was God Almighty putting us together. And if it was not from that, there's nothing I could have done to make that happen. And there's so many other areas in life where we look at something and we just don't know everything that actually made it happen, why somebody made a decision. We can infer, we can guess, we can make some pretty good guesses, but there's no way to know exactly what's happening. And so many times we're studying how to turn the oven knob just right to get it to work, because we think if we can turn it to 6, it'll do this thing, but we don't know that the person who did it last time, they actually had the oven plugged in. And so if you don't have the oven plugged in, no matter how well you turn the knob, it's not going to work. You have to have the main things in place before you have the other things. And so when we're learning lessons from other people and learning lessons from life and relationships and businesses and everything else, sometimes we're not looking at the right thing. Number 10 is we learn lessons from people who are in a later season of life. Think about an episode or a TV show, and what happens in season 1 is going to be totally different than what happens in season 7. There's different people. The person in season 7 has a whole lot more experience than the person in season 1. And I think screenwriters make this mistake a lot, not just because I'm using a season 1, season 7 analogy, but screenwriters and movie makers and people in creative fields, they love taking lessons from people who are well advanced in their years and doing a great job and have made a bunch of money, and they like applying those lessons to their starter films. And so if you were to learn a lesson from James Cameron or Steven Spielberg or Chris Nolan, it's great. It may pay off, it may be helpful, but you're probably learning the wrong lessons. You shouldn't be learning necessarily how to move a camera cinematically. You should be learning how to actually tell a story. And so just because you copied the same equipment or the same thing or the same advice, it may not mean the exact same result. And so sometimes we confuse what's happening in one season of life with what will happen in every season of life. Number 11 is innovation is always going to catch up. And sometimes we forget that just because one thing happened, times have changed and innovative things have happened. Innovation happens really fast. Think of the stock market. The same way you could study how some people got rich in the early 2000s is not going to be the same way that people get rich now. And there's some timeless principles underlying it all. But when we're looking at what people did or how things worked, a lot of times we learn the wrong lesson because we're not thinking about innovation, how quickly it moves. Number 12, I already made a video on this one so you can check it out, but we diagnose the wrong problem and then we apply the wrong solution to it. So you have to define the problem and know exactly the area of what was happening in this situation or this story or this relationship or this business. And once you figure it out, then you can figure out a solution. But if you have the wrong problem or you assume the problem was this, then you're probably going to apply the wrong solution to it. And even if it is a great solution, it's not going to apply to that specific problem. Number 13, one fix works, but it may not work long term. So we love looking at people who made this fix in their creative output or made this life hack by getting up at this certain time or doing this thing or whatever. And we like looking at a one-time fix and not thinking about the long-term potential. And so long-term matters a whole lot more than short-term. And sometimes short-term is great. Like you can make a great video, you can write a great script, you can do a lot of great stuff, but just finding that one hack may not be a lifelong trend that's going to work. And so we love copying the little hacks and the little things without thinking about the underlying flow, kind of like we were talking about earlier. Number 14, some things are preventive, some things are reactive. I think in medicine, I don't know the exact terms, but you think about how you can exercise and you're being proactive about having health issues. Just because you exercise doesn't mean you're not going to get hurt or not going to get sick. But if you exercise, you have a higher chance of living a longer, healthier life. And so you're doing something preventive. Or you can do something reactive. You can take weight loss medicine or do this or try and take all sorts of medicine in order to correct something that's already going wrong. And so a lot of times when we're looking at life, we forget that the way that somebody corrects something is not the same as somebody who's preventing something in the first place. That one you could talk about forever, but you get the idea. Number 15, this is the last one, is we're looking for what we want to see. And if you're looking for yellow cars, you're going to see a lot more yellow cars. And if you're looking in someone's life or looking at someone's advice or looking at a relationship that happened or looking at a book or whatever, and you're trying to figure out how to make something work and succeed in your life, you're going to be looking for what you're going to see. And so for all these reasons and a whole lot more that I haven't even thought of and a bunch of scientific ones that I can't even scratch the surface of, we're really bad at learning. We are so bad at learning. We think that we're good at researching and we think we're good at figuring out problems and we think we're good at learning what's actually happening, but we miss the timeless principles so many times because of a lot of these reasons and a whole lot more. So if you have another reason that you think I've missed, I'd love to hear it. So go ahead and put it in the comments and I will see you at the next video, even though I won't see you because I'm staring at the camera and not you.